I would ask, like, what's the purpose of prison? What are we hoping to accomplish?
It's just kind of always the way humans have done things, though, corralling people that did bad things and taking away their freedoms. I mean, that's just as far back as
it
anthropology goes. I think we've
all
seen
the
that.
way back. You can look at the information, and it's pretty obvious that the prison system does not work, and the court system does not work. It is not providing the utility that we expect.
If you're going to sit down with the person that you've harmed and you've been arrested for prostitution, who are you going to sit down with? The president and say, okay, Mr. President, show me on the doll where the prostitute hurt you. All right, my pretties, welcome to another kitchen sink microscopy. I am Casey Rochford. Yeah, I think that's right. And why don't you do us a solid? Check out ksmvidcast.com. We got a lot of cool stuff over there. You can see all the videos there, but you can also click on the title and get the podcast version. You can click on the title of the song and get the song too. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and what are there people out there looking at us? Oh shit.
Oh, good thing I'm not naked.
Well, hello everybody, those that choose to join us. You want to stick it out all the way to the end, there's going to be a song because we write our own music, and there will be something new at the end. And if you're not aware, I'm Eric Rosenblatt, for those who've never seen the show before. And
if we're not naked now, we might be by the end.
Well, apparently that happened one episode and we got demonetized for that, or it was not demonetized. It was you had to log in and confirm your age. I don't remember that. There might have been a lot of beer that episode, but who knows? Anything can happen.
You'll have to just figure out which one that was. So.
You might just have to watch all of them and like and subscribe too while you're at it. That would be nice. And leave a comment. Yeah. Maybe a few comments. I don't know. Have an argument or discussion down there in the comment section. So Casey, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, it's almost the 4th of July. And every now and then we try to kind of have a topic that coincides with the a few select holidays or special events or whatever. And we've done what is freedom, and we've done independence, and all this stuff. But I kind of wanted to get into sort of a philosophy revolving around like actual personal freedom, and discuss what the world, or even just our country, would be like with no prison.
Ooh. Wow. Well, yeah, that is definitely a philosophical thing. There's no simple answer to that. I'm sure a lot of people would jump to a conclusion using their jump to conclusion mat. And just assume that things would be a certain way. I don't know. It's tough because different cultures circumstances are different. Like if you had no prison in Japan, Japan has a very deep a culture that's deeply rooted in like family honor and things like that, and so it's kind of ingrained in you from the beginning to behave right, I guess, for the
Well,
most part. I mean, the Yakuza is a little bit of an exception there, but even they are different. But if you go to some other place, well, like the US, it might be different.
yeah, I mean,
And
I got to thinking about how the human condition is tailored to where, imprisonment doesn't really do anybody any good. Like you, say a family member got murdered and, they go to prison for however long. Well, that doesn't bring anybody back. Like nothing you do, no
no,
matter how much better you make it, nothing's going to bring them back. But like they're just going to probably reoffend, or they're going to get into worse trouble in there, or it's, like torturous and it costs a bunch of money,
yeah,
so
and what we have discussed this to some extent, like some of the effects of prison, or the prison industrial complex, I guess, and
yeah.
what it
Well, we
produces.
talked about ways of making it better, but not getting rid of it entirely.
Yeah, I don't know that getting rid of it, honestly, just kind of superficially contemplating it for a few seconds while you were talking, I don't know that getting rid of it would really change much. I don't think people kind of have this idea that this kind of field of dreams kind of thing, like, that just because it exists, that people are going to behave because they don't want to go there. Well, the statistics don't support that. People commit crimes all the time, knowing the consequences, the potential consequences of their actions. So I don't think it's necessarily even that much of a deterrent. And when you get in there, there's nothing. There's no goal, right? You have
Right.
a set amount of time, I guess, that you're in there, but there isn't like a purpose to being in prison. And so people are kind of just drifting through it, associating with other like-minded individuals, potentially other criminals, murderers, whatever, rapists, bad people, I guess. Not
Yeah.
everybody that's in prison is bad. People that are in there for pot possession or something, like, I don't think that's bad, or prostitution or something like that. Those kind of harken back to some previous episodes.
Yeah.
But if you have somebody that's murdered someone, yeah, you sending that person to prison doesn't necessarily bring, like, in my view, doesn't bring a proper closure. That you can't bring the person back.
Yeah.
Financial compensation doesn't fix the issue. It's just money. I mean, I guess you could equate money to time. You do give up a little bit of your life to earn money. So maybe there's that, but it's like, that's
And
kind of a paltry substitute for the person who's dead now.
yeah, I mean, to me, the only thing we really need to be doing is, uh, you know, instead of this band-aid, we need to like get at the core of what's wrong. And that's, socioeconomic issues. It's cultural issues.
Mental health
That,
too is another factor.
what's that?
Mental health.
And mental health. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I got to thinking about this and I was like, maybe you could have, I mean, you have to have some kind of response. You
Yeah.
can't just you can't just say, well, let's tear down all the prisons and not, have crime or what, or not have laws or anything, because it would just break into chaos or whatever. But you could funnel all that money that you're throwing down the drain into like actual productive things for communities. And so I went and I looked up on YouTube. There's this TED talk by Deanna Van Buren about, she's like an architect and she refused to design any prisons or you know um, juvenile hall sort of things or anything.
Well, if I were an architect designing prisons, they'd all have holes in the walls.
Well, that's kind of what she did. She ended up making, like, going to places like Detroit and Chicago and New York and stuff, and setting up a variety of different things based around like restorative justice. and like safe places, healing places where you can actually bring, it's almost like arbitration. Or like a psychology sort of counseling session. Like you bring the offender and the offendee together to talk it out. And she's mentioned that systems like this that have been studied, reoffense went down like 75%, because it builds empathy. Like you actually have to face what you did. You have to face the person that you've hurt or the people that you've hurt.
And I would add like a court scenario, being in court with a person is a very clinical, procedural sort of place. So you don't really face somebody there because
and
there's
all
these
frustrating and expensive. And basically, if you can't afford a good defense, you're hosed.
But I mean, from the standpoint of rehabilitation, say, the court is not, it's kind of like people just wash their hands after the court proceedings. Like, I guess that person's guilty. We'll put him in a hole for a while and forget about him. Well, maybe like actually somebody having to come face to face with somebody and exchange stories, like tell their experiences and how they feel about things might change the game significantly. Like if you've killed somebody and you have to sit down in a room with the family or the loved one of somebody you murdered or whatever, or inadvertently killed, I mean, it would certainly change your perspective a lot on that.
It's not like it's not going to be as emotionally impactful as being in prison would be, but it's not as useless of an impact, it's not impacting for the sake of impact like a punitive response is. It's more like trying to elicit a positive outcome, or as positive as you can get, right?
Exactly. Like, I mean, you can't rewind the past.
You can even like arbitrate case by case, come up with like solutions. Like, say you accidentally killed somebody or whatever, and you orphaned their children. Well, maybe you like contribute in some way to making sure that they're taken care of, rather than them having no parents and you're just rotting in jail and taxpayers are paying for that, but not your child care, so
exactly. Like, and the thing is, like, every situation is different. I think it's kind of, the legal system and the government and the populace in general kind of just perceives everything as kind of like black or white. Like, well, murder's murder, it's more complex than that. There are different situations, and the solutions to dealing with that are complex as well, and they require individual attention, and that's something state systems are not very good at, but maybe that's something that's needed. Because I would ask, like, what's the purpose of prison? What are we hoping to accomplish?
Well, I don't even think the state is the biggest problem. I think the entire population is the problem, because we all have it ingrained into us that we need blood. We need an eye for an eye.
Well, the state is merely, it's kind of an extension of the general population's way of seeing things. So those processes didn't happen in a vacuum. Somebody conjured them up based on the way they feel, and over the years, we've kind of added to that.
It's just kind of always the way humans have done things, though.
Well, I mean, in a way,
corralling people that did bad things and taking away their freedoms. I mean, that's just as far back as anthropology goes. I think
all
we've seen
the way back. Now, granted, we've gotten a little bit more. I guess there's kind of a process in place there, and things aren't as posse based, where back in the day they just like take you out back and hit you in the head with a rock until you're dead, and not have a trial. At least there's a trial, although it's a little bit one-sided. And the putting people in prison, there's at least in theory a bit of humanity in there, more than there was back in the day. I don't see it as like we don't have all the answers right now. It's kind of an ongoing evolutionary process where we're learning things and improving stuff and figuring out what works and doesn't. I mean, I would hope that would be my hope. But it's kind of, I think the way things are now, people have this idea that we do know the right way, and what we're doing now is right, and there's no need to change it, which is bullshit. It's clearly bullshit. It's clearly not working. I mean, you merely have to go look. I mean, geez, libraries or online databases and things like that. You can look at the information, and it's pretty obvious that the prison system does not work, and the court system does not work. It is not providing the utility that we expect out of it.
Yeah. But I implore people to think from a freedom perspective, 4th of July and all that stuff, can you imagine, like, if you committed a crime, how how remorseful or regretful you might feel about it? You will be jaded by the removal of your independence. And if we basically never have a situation where somebody is held against their will and we just work with them, I mean, yeah, some are going to fall through the cracks. The sociopaths you probably can't reach, but at least then you can work with them enough to the point where you recognize that and then treat it. Whereas you might never recognize it if they just go to prison and just keep shivving people all the time,
Yeah. Well, and especially if it's the very first time you've done something like that. I think that's the opportunity to nip something in the bud before it grows into something worse.
Yeah.
Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has their bad days. They do stupid shit. And yeah, maybe a bit of some measure of second chance, I think, is in order. Granted, there's going to be people. There are definitely people and situations like, the serial killers and stuff. They kill like 50 people. Okay, well, that's not a mistake. That's deliberate, and it's repeatedly deliberate. There's something seriously wrong that needs to be addressed. But I would think,
well, I mean, we'd still have mental institutions because there are cases where people cannot function in society.
Exactly.
Take care of themselves.
There's going to be situations like that, and maybe something akin to a prison would serve that purpose, but it shouldn't be like a memory hole. It should be an institution of rehabilitation. That should really be the goal. Like, I don't understand the idea that exists out there of like, one false move and, well, you're going down into the brink for the rest of your life, and we're not going to do anything. You're just going to be down there. We're going to feed you and keep you alive. Why? I mean, why not just kill somebody at that point? What's the purpose? What is the end game there? And that's kind of what I look at with these things, is like, what are we hoping to achieve? Is prison punitive or is it rehabilitative? I would hope we'd lean more to the rehabilitation side, unless we're some kind of savages.
And that's why I think we don't
people up,
we don't need prison, like, period. Because here's the other thing. If you moved to a system that was more, that restorative justice style, where no one will ever get imprisoned for, no matter what they do, caveats being that sociopaths that are ill, right?
Yeah.
But this eliminates victimless crime, punitive measures, right? Like there's no more, like, if you're going to sit down with the person that you've harmed and you've been arrested for prostitution, who are you going to sit down with? The president and say, okay, Mr. President, show me on the doll where the prostitute hurt you. Like,
well, and that is a thing, that the victimless crime stuff should not even be crimes to begin with.
But
there
wouldn't be a way for it to be a crime if that were the case. Like what do you do? Like,
yeah,
okay, slap him with a fine maybe, but nobody's going to see any sense in that. Like, I think it would all just go away, I think.
Probably so. And I think, this is a systemic change kind of thing. And it's also a societal change kind of thing, like kind of deprogramming people from their propaganda programming from back in the day, like the DARE program and Just Say No and all this shit. And, all the lies that we were fed as kids about how bad certain things are, inherently bad. I think that would be a big thing, because it would be very hard to convict somebody on anything if society as a whole really didn't give a shit about it. Like if nobody cared about prostitution or drug use, then no one would be pushing for it. All the people on jury duty, they'd just be like, yeah, whatever, that's not really a big deal.
How much of society really cares about tax evasion, though? I mean,
probably not much. But the thing is, when you're on a jury, I mean, we did an episode on jury nullification. When you're on a jury, they very, very sort of forcefully kind of tell you, like, you're not supposed to put your own philosophy into this. You're supposed to be judging things based on what the law says. And that was one of the things that kind of made me think, like, well, why can't we just replace this with robots? Like, why do we need people to decide something there's no nuance, there's no room for some analysis or something like that. But I think in order for that to change, it does require changes on multiple fronts. You can get rid of prisons, but that in itself is not enough. You have to change society. You have to change the hearts and minds of people. There has to basically be a massive paradigm shift, which is possible.
Well, it starts small, right? Like,
yeah,
a few cities here and there do it. A couple years go by and people see the undeniable fact that, crime is finally taken a nosedive in that area,
well, it's like marijuana legalization, right? Like it took a few places. Colorado, I think, was one of the first. Washington State was another. And I remember, oh God, living in Washington, like we do. I don't know if you remember this, but I certainly remember all the ad campaigns, like oh my God, if they do this, the whole fucking place is going to light up. It's going to be totally crazy. Everything's going to fall apart. Like the sky is falling kind of bullshit narratives, basically. And that didn't happen. You look today, and it's how many years has marijuana been legal in Washington State?
Almost 10.
Yeah, it's
8, 9, 10, somewhere around there.
Yeah, and
I mean, it is more pervasive.
It's totally okay.
It's pretty much everywhere now, even out in the open where it's not supposed to be.
Yes,
but it's not hurting anyone.
That's my point. Is like the cities are not like crumbling and yeah, like all of the doom saying that was going on never came to pass.
Yeah,
and I would imagine the same exact procedures would happen with prostitution.
Yeah, I feel like that would be such a, I don't know, like a huge chunk of fat taken off of our expenditure as far as a country goes. Like,
yes, the drug war in general and incarceration and all
Mhm.
the litigation and the court stuff having to do with the drug war is a massive chunk. You know, it's huge. Like probably the majority of our cost and time spent is dealing with nonsense, basically just fabricated stuff, and you know, just completely arbitrary. And if you look into the history of the drug war, it's very racist. So
Oh, yeah.
there is that. Same thing
And
with guns. You know,
incarceration.
yeah,
Like,
incarceration, gun laws, drug laws, prostitution, all that stuff comes back to some faction of the population that some other faction didn't like, and
yeah.
the one that didn't like the other one happened to have some position of sway within the state, and they swayed, and got some changes made. And then of course, you know, the propaganda comes out, and they have to convince people like, hey, you know, oh, this is bad. Anybody that smokes dope, like, they're a bad person. They deserve to go to prison for the rest of their life, which you can, by the way, on a federal side of things.
And there's this inexorable hill you have to climb when you finally do get out of prison, right? Like, you can't get a job, you got
Oh,
nowhere to
that,
live,
yes.
you got
Oh,
no
God.
money.
That bothers me to no end. Like the idea of, you know, you being a felon. Like, no, you're a felon while you're in prison. You know,
Yeah.
once you've been convicted and you're serving your time, whatever. I mean, we can. I mean, the discussion about like what happens while you're there is certainly open. But once you're done, that should be it. You're done. You're out. Like
Yeah.
now you're no longer a felon. Like you did something a while back, and slate should be clean. Like, yeah,
And if
because what purpose does it serve for society if somebody who did something that we don't like, right, gets put into a cage for a certain duration of time and associating with other people who are put in cages for doing other stuff we don't like, um, and then they get out and they have the mark of Cain on their head. They can't get a job. They can't get an apartment. They can't find, like, basically everything is excluded from them. Like they really can't go back into society the way they were before. And so what purpose does that serve? Like, isn't that just reinforcing, like, basically creating a condition that can only result in them going back to the things they did before?
uh-huh.
Why would we do something like that? That makes no sense.
No dogs allowed.
Oh yeah.
That's exactly it. Like, I feel like eliminating prison would improve on so many facets of society and humanity. Like, you know, you wouldn't really have felons, right? We base what a felon is off of prison.
Yeah.
Like, if they've been in prison, we call them a felon or an ex-felon or an ex-con or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, we wouldn't have terms like that anymore if there was no prison.
Well, and you'd also have to get rid of the laws that put them there in the first place too. That's another problem. And also the society who were jurors who elected to put them in that same place or give them that verdict, essentially, that put them there. So like I was saying, it is a little bit of a multi-front kind of thing.
I don't know that you would need to do away with trials and stuff like that, because you do still have to come to the conclusion that someone was in fact wronged and it was you that wronged them, right?
Yeah, I think evaluation is that's good.
Yeah, like I don't think we can really do away with the whole court system. You know, like there does have to be like some cornerstone of justice that is regulated in some manner, right?
Yeah.
There will still be some laws, there will still be some some juries and some court time and stuff like that. But I really don't think the punitive end should be so punitive.
I agree. Yeah, like certainly. Oh man, this is a pretty complex discussion. Yeah, there's definitely going to have to be a process. You do have to evaluate things, but it's what you do after you've come to your conclusion that's really critical. Like, sure, you could look at the facts and say, okay, well, this is all the data that we have, and people evaluate things, and I would like there to be a lot more personal involvement in that regard, like people really thinking. There is a reason why it's a jury of your peers and not just a jury of the populace. And apparently that particular term is kind of forgotten or excluded intentionally or something like that. That should be a factor. People should be analyzing the conditions on which this particular situation had occurred, and judging it based on that too. Like a little bit of personal experience, a little bit of like, right and wrong analysis, that kind of thing.
But what if court and the jury were all involved in the conversation about how best to rectify the situation? Because
that is a really good point, because usually the jury just simply determines if somebody is guilty, and then the judge determines the punishment.
Yeah.
What if it was all combined together and the judge was kind of just, I guess, a mediator, moderator, mediator, that kind of thing, like somebody that just kind of like kept order, kind of kept things moving along, got people talking, observed procedural norms or something like that.
In fact, judges could probably go away and just replace them with like social workers.
Yeah, well, depending on the situation, that is the issue, is that there are a lot of varied situations that require kind of different approaches. And so I don't think you can have like a one size fits all sort of thing. Maybe.
Yeah, I guess you do need somebody with some legal prowess.
All you need is somebody that understands the current like procedural norm, right? Which actually should be updated. That is a scientific way. We should be changing things based on experience, failures and successes and things like that, which we're not. We've basically, at least here in the US, the judicial system has failed over and over and over again, but we keep doing the same thing. And we all know the internet's definition of that. So, maybe you do need somebody who's kind of like independent, who doesn't have an interest in the outcome of said case, but has an interest in things following a particular procedure. That way, there's, I guess, order in the court. Yeah,
it was interesting watching that video. Deanna Van Buren gave that TED talk, right? 30 of these restorative justice centers would cost as much as building one prison. Operating, even if it's a wash, you're expanding your reach, like geographically, you're creating positive outcomes. Like even if we didn't save a dime, we would be gaining so much more on the back end.
Sure. And there's no reason not to try something different. All you have to do is look at the data, and that the current way we do things is absolutely shitty and ineffectual.
If it's not broke, don't fix it. But if it is broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and trying revolutionary ideas, at least in a limited sense, is good. Like that. That's how you learn new things. if this actually does have a positive effect, maybe that's the direction we should be going. But getting people behind it, again, it goes back to this whole like multi-front kind of thing. Like the general public isn't behind these kinds of things. If you said, hey, we're going to get rid of the prisons, everybody's going to be panicking like, oh my God, there's going to be felons running around the streets shooting machine guns like pew 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 like all day long. That's the impression they have because of how much propaganda they've absorbed. And that's bad. That is a bad thing. That's exactly why we're here where we are now, and why it's kind of stagnated. I mean, how much has changed in 100 years? Really? Probably not much.
Yeah.
And I think trying revolutionary ideas, like new things, is good. And maybe in a limited scope. Okay, if something is very different, we might not want to just adopt it everywhere right now. But let's try it and really critically evaluate it. Like, what is the outcome? What's the effect of trying this? If it works, well, why not do it? I mean, why not? I don't understand why anybody would not want to do that. Maybe there's a subsect of the population. And here's the thing, like, people who have been wronged are not necessarily the people fueling this fire. It's everybody else fueling it. The people who, in fact, it is not uncommon for families of murder victims and stuff to forgive the murderer and make amends with them eventually.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing. Like, in fact, that would probably go a long way to preventing another such event from the same person. But if you just have this cold system that's all robotic and just does things according to the plan, and that's all it ever does, well, you get what we have now.
Yeah. It just drives me crazy because yeah, I mean, you're right. Like, everyone's going to be resistant to this because everybody always has this philosophy like, oh, that's different. It could never work here.
Yeah.
And they base that off of absolutely nothing except their own opinion.
And yeah. People are very inclined to kind of like imagine the worst possible outcome and assume that that's the only outcome.
Yeah.
That is a common thing.
They'll point to stuff like, oh, you can't compare this area to that area over there because it's completely different. But we're all fucking human. Like, you can't sell me on that bullshit of cross-cultural comparisons. Like, if something works somewhere between humans, we're not that different. It's going to work.
No, there are exceptions to that. There are definitely situations where the conditions are vastly different between situations. But when it comes to like really big crimes like murder and stuff like that, yeah, that's a human thing. That's a global thing. There's not necessarily a cultural factor involved in that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I want to keep an eye on what that lady's doing, because that's
oh wait,
find any way possible.
Froze for a second. You said that's, and then there was seconds of freezing.
Supposed to have faster internet now, but I clearly don't. I would love to watch what that lady's doing, because I just want to like contribute to that in any way I can. Get the word out, or volunteer, or whatever it takes, because it's such a cool idea.
And the thing is, we don't know. The best way to understand the right way to deal with things is to experiment, to test things. And if you just assume without experimentation, well, that's not really, you're going to have shitty outcomes, I guess,
Well,
or unpredictable outcomes.
Like I mentioned, the study saw 75% better, people were not, it's what is it? Anti-recidivism.
Recidivant, yeah.
Yeah. Basically like 75% is not an anomaly.
No.
Like if it was like, oh, we saw a 7%, decrease in reoccurrence of crimes, like, well, okay, maybe that's an anomaly, but 75%,
Yeah,
there's something working there.
now maybe this could be a small sample size, but it's definitely big enough that it deserves.
We're talking about a city, though.
Yeah, it deserves further study. Like, try it in other places. See how it works. I mean, maybe this is the future.
I mean, you look at a graph of our incarceration rates, like we're almost double Russia, which is almost double everybody else.
Yeah. Per capita, don't we put more people in prison than North Korea?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like, and that, I think everybody can agree that place is very repressive. Like, that is, and that's just sad. And we consider ourselves to be civilized. What does it mean to be civilized at that point? Like, I mean, are we civilized because we've simply forgotten?
We have a civilization that we exist in.
Yeah. So does North Korea.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, oh man, this is a pretty interesting topic, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, and well, coming from an anarchist, like prisons shouldn't exist. That's my personal view. I believe that, and I'll defend it.
Yeah, I'm on board with that.
Yeah.
And I don't even think that needs to be a political thing. It, like we started off talking about, it's about freedom and independence. Like, that's a human thing.
Oh, sure. And it's also about what works. Like, what is the goal? What do you hope to achieve after something bad happens?
Person doesn't cease to be a human because they committed a crime, which somebody has gotten together and arbitrarily decided is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that in itself is probably its own entire episode.
Yeah,
is legislation.
Somewhat unrelated, but
but that's a good point. And I think there are certain things that, by and large, most people would agree on. If you steal from someone, if you rape them, if you imprison them against their will, well, wait a second. Isn't that what we're doing? If you kill them, and the death penalty, I am so against the death penalty. Like, that is bullshit. Oh man, I don't think that should exist. I think that is something from a very long time ago, and it shouldn't exist, especially if we consider ourselves to be advanced, right?
Well,
if we're so advanced,
why?
If we're so advanced and we know everything, right? Why are we just like giving up and killing people? Like, I guess we can't fix this guy. Let's just, electrocute him, or lethal injection, or gas chamber, or whatever. Like, okay, clearly we're basically in the Stone Age at that point, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm an alien, so
I mean, we did a whole episode on that in our first season, I think. Mm-hmm. And I might have been a little bit on the fence about the death penalty then, but because that was all like in a frame of mind that there's either prison or death. And now that I see that there's a very real option that doesn't involve either of those things, I don't see any point to that. Because you're not, again, you're not bringing somebody back from the dead. You're just adding to the dead.
Yeah. And how does killing another person fix the problem of somebody being killed or whatever?
You
crime?
Can't predict the future. You don't know if they're going to kill again. You can guess, but I mean, I suppose they could outright say, I'm definitely going to kill again if you don't kill me. And then, well, I mean, they're basically volunteering at that point. So I guess it's kind of a moot, but.
Well, and maybe at that point, that's where a prison would make sense. In my worldview, I guess a
Or
prison
the death penalty. I mean, if you even call it a penalty at that point, they're basically saying that's basically a voluntary suicide, right? Or a voluntary assisted suicide, I guess.
Yes, yes.
Right? Like, if you don't kill me, I'm just going to go kill other people.
That would be voluntary, involuntary assisted suicide. Yeah, I mean that is such a small proportion of the population, the prison population. There's very, very few people who are like that.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe some are beyond redemption. I don't know. I would challenge anybody to tell me what redemption looks like and how you achieve it. If you're that kind of epic guru, maybe you should be working in that system trying to solve those problems. If you're going to be an armchair YouTube commenter, then yeah, I mean, but I don't know that that's any better than what we have now. It's kind of the same thing. Man, I think there's some situations where you do kind of have to resort to extreme measures, but those are very rare cases where it's a especially weird person, Ted Bundy or something. They're just like out there killing people and they can't stop killing. Well, maybe you got to put them in a hole for a while and figure it out later. But the goal should be to figure it out, right? Like, hey, how did this happen? Why do we have a person who's doing this? But the current system is not like that. It's not self-evaluating. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, okay, putting them in the hole is the end goal. They're there. We're safe now. Okay, go on. I'm gonna go back to work.
Well, yeah. I mean, you could actually like sit and work with those people, and maybe it goes nowhere. Like, well, quote unquote nowhere. But you're learning a lot from that. You're learning a lot about their mental condition. Like you're learning a lot about how people like that think, and it gives you the ability to learn and adapt your methodology to dealing with that. So maybe you don't ever reach Ted Bundy, but maybe in the future you can reach other people. Maybe you can identify them earlier. Maybe you can reach them before it becomes a Ted Bundy.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting at.
So it's not like that's wasted effort.
No, it never is.
Even if you don't get that redemption or whatever, or bring honor to your house.
Yeah. Well, and like, what would be redemption, and what is justice? I think these things are kind of nebulous terms that don't really have any meaning, and it's kind of subjective. And yeah, like people on the outside looking in to situations like this, they think, oh yeah, justice is served. That person went to prison or they were executed or whatever. Yep, life is good. Back to work. But that doesn't, like you had said, we should be trying to understand what's going on, like why people do that, how they get to that point, and what we can do to help before it gets to the danger zone, I guess.
Yeah. Like take Derek Chauvin for example. I mean, I'm all for seeing him get like 20 or 30 years or whatever, because that's the best we can do right now with the system we have. But I would much rather see him sitting down with the family, hearing about who George Floyd was, hearing about how it's affected their lives, letting them hear what was going on in his head, because you can't see that on a video.
It's true.
And and letting them talk it out. And ultimately it would be so awesome to see a Derek Chauvin going around as a former police officer, talking to other police officers about containing their rage or checking their hate at the door, like whatever it is that was going on in his head probably goes on in their heads too. And if he could basically come at them with that brotherhood mentality, but from a standpoint of peace.
Well, that is basically the Daryl Davis approach.
Yeah.
Which I think is probably one of the best ways of dealing with things.
We'll probably never get that guy on the show. I keep trying.
Oh, someday. Daryl, if you're out there, we'd love to talk to you. Man, like from the very early days.
I think we'd have to pay out the ass to have him on the show or something.
Yeah, so if you'd like to see Daryl Davis on the show, go down there to patreon.com/KSMVidcast. Throw some money our way so we've got a little bit of resources to get Daryl Davis on the show. And if you don't know who Daryl Davis is, go to YouTube.
He needs to be on the show.
Yeah. Type in Daryl Davis into a Google search or YouTube or something like that, and look at his stuff. It's good stuff. Amazing. Like, that is the way you solve seemingly unsolvable problems. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, I certainly think that whole like fireside chat sort of approach is a much better way to deal with things. It may not always solve every problem. And I think that's the important thing, is people have this desire inside for there to be like the magic bullet, like the one thing, this one cool trick that's going to solve everything. Well, that's not how the universe works.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. There are complex issues, there are complex problems, each of which requires different solutions and individual analysis. And maybe there's problems you can't solve, and you just have to pass it on to the next generation.
Okay, yeah. So let's say this whole idea of sitting down with somebody that's harmed you doesn't sit well with you. Let's say you've got PTSD from the whole interaction. Let's say it's a person who raped you violently. Like, you don't want to sit at a table with them. I get that. But you could maybe start with small steps, like they write you a letter and you write them a letter. It doesn't even have to be dialogue per se, just getting your feelings out.
Yeah.
Whatever those feelings might be, and moving the next step from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I think that's a pretty...
This needs some work, or that is a good point that we can build on, or whatever. I don't know.
Well, yeah, and it does kind of trouble me that the way society at large views things is kind of like a switch. Like, at 1 minute you're a good person and you do something, and all of a sudden now you're a bad person forever.
Yeah.
So wait a second, no matter how many good things you do after being the quote bad person, you can never redeem yourself. But when you were a good person, you do one bad thing and all of a sudden you're a bad person. Like that.
That's how credit works.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, that and that too deserves a little bit of adjustment, I guess.
Yeah. And grading in school.
Yeah.
It's all the same principle.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of this is societal. Like, these things are born out of societal expectations, the way different cultures view the world, the kind of procedures it's sort of self-feeding too. Like, you know what? Okay, well, I'm going to bring up a big point. Like, why do you believe the things you believe?
Hmm.
Like, where does it come from? What is it? Where's the genesis of the things you believe? And do you personally self-analyze and question those things and kind of determine if they're actually legitimate or not? And I think that like most people don't. Most people
No.
just assume like, well, this is how society works. I guess this is how everything is. This is how I am. Like, all
I
right, well,
mean,
deep thinker there.
as usual, I'm going to blame religion because it reinforces the idea that that's the proper way to think. Is that blind obedience? You know, like
Well,
this is
yeah,
the way things are. This is the only way things can work, and you can't even like question it.
oh,
Like,
for sure, religiosity is behind a lot of things. But once somebody breaks free of that religious thinking, they're still in the mindset of like the same mindset that a
yeah,
lot of
yeah, that's
people.
true. That there is a separate breakthrough for that type of thinking.
Yeah,
Um,
that's kind of how I ended up being an anarchist. Um, but that's a whole different episode. Yet another different episode.
I
Um,
mean, even that though, you hold pretty hard and fast to some ideas. You know, like
but
there's always a
these are
point
ideas.
where
These are ideas that I did not. No one told me to think these things. These are self-evaluated, observational based, like data-based ideas. Um,
well, that's
like
the thing about
things that I thought.
religiosity. Then nobody outright tells you how to think.
Well,
That's not
do
how it
they?
works.
No, they
That would
do.
never work. No,
But
you go
okay,
and tell
they don't
someone how
tell
to
you how
think, and they
to.
won't do it.
No, they don't tell you how to think, but they tell you God tells you how to think. And so, you know, if you're a believer in God, you know, naturally whatever the priest or pastor or bishop or whatever says.
Well, let's move it to politics though. Like,
Yeah.
um, there's even though there's like a president or whatever, there's actually no like leader of a way of thinking in politics, right?
Yeah. Well,
Because
especially in a complex system like the US. There's like
yeah,
literally thousands of people behind
yeah,
that system.
it's the congregation of thinkers that kind of moves the game pieces around the board. It's not like an edict from high above that tells you how to think or that this is the only way it works. It's the group think, you know, like everyone in that group says, you know, like, oh, Democrats way can't work, oh, Republicans way can't work, and both of them say no other way can work. No third party can work, you know, like it's all it's
Oh, that
all
is a
religious
huge,
thinking, but it doesn't come
huge.
from one point.
That's a huge problem.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. The idea that there's only two sides to an issue or
And
a way
that's
of.
why I refuse to ascribe to any one political ideology. I don't want to box myself into anything.
Well, and you shouldn't, because it'd be like, you know, deciding that you're Methodist or
Yeah,
Lutheran or something. Like, well, now all of a sudden you have to do whatever the edict is from on high from the Lutheran church or something. Like, why?
yeah,
Who would want to do that? I don't understand that stuff.
yeah. Like I like anarchist stuff, like the Chaz or whatever. That,
Yes. Oh,
you know.
yes. Hell
but,
yeah.
but then like I like a little more structure to certain things that like it really should be more four-dimensional than it is. And
Oh, yeah. And by the way, what you like can actually be achieved in an anarchist society. We'll have to address that at some point in the future. Um,
yeah, I think I know where you're driving at that, but there's a lot of problems with that.
well, you know, but again, you know, you analyze things and adjust accordingly. It should be a scientific evolutionary process.
Mm-hmm.
We can't come from the standpoint of knowing all and making everything fit into our limited understanding box. We have to assume we probably don't know anything. That's why I always say I'm a fucking idiot. I am an idiot. Like I don't know shit. And you know, the thing that got me to that point is learning more. Like the more stuff that I learned and understood, the more stupid I felt. So, you know, take that for what you will. That's my lesson for the day, I guess.
Yeah, I feel
and it's
all
okay. It's okay to be dumb and not know things. Like, you know, we always idolize people from years past and stuff. And it's like, what did they know? They didn't know shit either. They knew less than we do. And we know way more, and we're equally stupid. So I don't know. Yeah. More beer.
A fair amount of beer, I guess.
Yeah, I think that we might have had enough for now. I think this was actually a pretty good conversation. Man, I feel like there's so many things, so many more avenues to
a lot of spin-offs too.
Yeah. Oh man, as usual.
Yeah. Yeah, we need more
beer,
more patrons.
Oh,
so that we can make this a full-time gig and do a few episodes a week or something, you know, like
yeah.
And yeah,
because
I mean,
you know, we actually like do stuff during the day jobs and stuff like that. This is kind of a labor of love that we do. This is
yeah. You know, like maybe I should make another, you know how there's tiers in Patreon, like you can donate this much and get that or whatever. Like maybe we should come up with something super gold and super platinum that somebody at that level would get. And you know, we could call it the Patron level. So you can like be a patron of the Patron level on patreon.com/KSMVidcast and get this super awesome. I mean, maybe we all drink Patron and like get drunk and talk about shit.
Oh yeah. Hey, you know, being a guest on the show would be a nice reward. And you know, it'd be a reward for everybody, I think. I mean, you know, I think back to the anti-vax episode, and although that was a little bit tumultuous, that was a fun episode.
We needed a moderator for that because he spit out so much junk in 15 minutes straight. Like there was almost no way to like choreograph a response.
Well, there wasn't. I was supposed to be the moderator, and I couldn't even moderate. He just kept talking and talking in one long, unbroken sentence, moving from topic to topic.
It was really quite hypnotic.
But it was still a good episode. I hopefully we'll have more like that. Maybe not quite like that, but on par with that, I guess, in terms of their gravity.
Yeah, I mean, well, that guy just drove home the point that there's good arguments and there's facts. You can be good at arguing, but not have any facts on your side.
Well, and there was a point where, like, I think like 45 minutes in, he was like, "Did I win?"
Yeah,
and I'm like, "Do you ask that during a chess game?" You know, because until the final move, until checkmate, you haven't won. I remember a game playing chess with my friend, and he got so pissed off that I was really like good at like playing chess that he was like, "All right, fuck it, fine. All right, I'm going to give you. We each get a king and a queen and a pawn." And I still kicked his ass. Like, and I didn't even repeat moves. So, but then again, I suck at chess. I mean, up against somebody like Caleb, you know. Oh no. But the perspective too, you know, like you think you're a badass, you know, there's going to be another badass ahead of you up there somewhere. There's another person that's better than you, which is why you gotta be a nice person. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I don't know if that made any sense, but
yeah, I just thought that would be a good, somewhat freedom related topic to go into. I know we've kind of discussed prisons on a few different levels, you know, like the whole idea of a better prison, the whole idea of how we treat prisoners, but we never really discussed the idea of no prisons whatsoever.
Yeah. So. And I like this discussion. This is definitely something we have not really quite delved into before.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's an excellent topic. And, you know, well, you know, what better topic for the 4th of July than to talk about people who have no freedom?
Yeah.
Like if you...
And venturing out to do things, nobody's quite done it in that way before, you know, like in that spirit, like I think that would be something that we should do as almost like a new Independence Day. Like nobody loses their independence. Nobody gets disenfranchised. Nobody gets put away for the rest of their lives for hurting nobody, you know?
Yeah, well, and almost nobody. There again, there's gonna be
I'm talking about the victimless crime.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Those, oh man. Dude, you should, if people should watch the jury nullification episode, because victimless crimes ought to go away very, very fast.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to make them go away. You don't have to vote, you don't have to legislate, you don't have to do anything, just get on a jury and you can fix it right quick. You might just have to lie a little bit, but you know, given the fact that cops lie to people, whatever. What's the harm?
But don't take my word for it.
Dun, dun, dun. Oh man, reading Rainbow.
Just have a think. The kitchen sink.
Oh man, we have to find the person that did that original animation. And it is amazing. I love the direction we go and the kind of like novel thoughts we have, which I honestly don't think are, I don't think very many people bring what we talk about up ever. Like our episodes yield some amazing stuff.
Oh yeah.
Like I mean, never before heard or thought of thoughts.
We are definitely the only YouTube channel that has discussed the mana machine.
Yes.
And we're becoming somewhat popular for that slowly.
Yeah. and we are going to do, I think we're going to do a live stream or something, probably.
Hopefully. Machine. Haven't heard back from that guy, but yeah.
Well, even then, even if not, like we could always go back into that. That is a big topic in my head. Like, I love that. You man, I could be like about to pass out for the night, and you could say the mana machine. I'm like, what? The mana machine? Oh yes, game on.
That's basically how we came to get into the band together. Actually, was talking about making a concept album around that.
Yep.
You know, the mana machine.
And I think we will.
A little bit of trivia.
Yeah. I think we'll probably have to do that concept album. We also have the Mana Machine. We also have the Man Machine concept album. So we got a few albums to get done. Granted, we do already have like quite a catalog of music behind that. It just has to be tightened up and fixed a bit and turned into a vinyl album, because that's how you do things these days. If you want the kids, you got to do vinyl.
Weird saying that.
No, I didn't mean that in that way.
Well, if you have any ideas or thoughts about getting rid of prison altogether and still having some sense of right and wrong in society, leave a comment or two, and throw us a few bucks on the Patreon level of patreon.com/KSMvidcast.
Does that mean we have to drink Patron?
I mean,
why not?
Yeah, why not?
I mean, it kind of fond of space dust, but yeah, why not?
Branch out, man.
Yeah. Oh, I do. Space dust is so good. For those who don't know, you should probably try space dust.
Well, why don't you lighten up on that until they start paying for advertising with us? So.
Yeah, it is not cheap. So support my space dust lush fund. And we'll keep making videos.
Thanks for deep sink diving with us into freedom
and prison and everything else.
Cue eagle sound that's not a hawk.
Exactly. Yeah. And eagles are carrion birds, so do with that what you will. Yeah. Oh man. And to think that was it Benjamin Franklin that thought that the turkey should be the national bird? And actually that would be good, because turkeys are fucking dicks. Oh my god. Oh, they're crazy dangerous,
just like Americans.
Yeah. Well, hey, it's kept us safe thus far, I guess. For
dangerous dickheads. Yeah. The perfect bird.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, maybe it was foreshadowing. Well, I guess that's a good point to end on. I guess that's about all the time we have for today. Bringing back a phrase from season 1.
Enjoy this song.
Yeah, well, hopefully you enjoy the episode, and have a good night, everybody.